Stay. Do you want to tell everybody about the exits? So welcome to the housing meeting, housing committee meeting. Do you want to tell everybody where the exits are?
Sure.
Exits are at the end of the stairs.
Yep, so there's stairs and elevator here. Don't use the elevator. If there's an emergency, use the stairs. That's also a safe refuge area near the stairs if you need to be rescued for any reason. And if that stairway is unavailable, if you go behind me and to the right down the hallway, effectively to the other end of the building, there is another staircase on that end.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So taking a look at the agenda, we have one change tonight that Tom Bailey could not be with us. And so we're gonna reschedule him for next month, and he was gonna give us the Economic Development Committee update on the Tech Hub, and that was supposed to be at 7:30. So any changes in the order of, so just taking a look, minutes, fair housing, LDR path. Yeah, I think it'll just flow just the way it has. I think it's fine.
What about getting somebody from the committee to the
Oh,
master plan?
We're just gonna put that under other business.
Oh, okay.
or
Sounds good.
announcements, I guess, or.
It has to, I was going to announce during other business or during announcements and then and then other businesses at the end.
Okay. Do you have any announcements?
Yes, I do.
Oh,
So-
actually, it's not related to any public comment, or
And we have Megan.
we have Megan.
Yep.
Hi, Megan. Welcome.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Megan, can you hear us all right? Especially Nora, I don't know where the microphone is coming from at this point.
I think we can see her.
Oh, you can
Yeah.
hear.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I don't have the best lighting in here.
That is okay. Looks like
You can hear all of us okay?
Yeah, Yeah,
Okay,
that's fine.
excellent.
thank you.
Okay. So 6:03, open to the public, items not related to the agenda. Any public comment or questions from anybody visiting the committee or?
Nope.
Okay, thanks, Ryan.
I don't have any prior information.
Okay.
If you have time to give a little something. Or, sorry.
No, go ahead. Just as we go through the agenda, we'll explain each item as we go. So we were just, this item, we don't have a printed one.
The full.
Yeah, it's online.
Yeah, it's on the-
It's online. Go to, yeah, it's
southburlingtonvt.gov.
And then I'll just announce with.
Yeah, and feel free to ask any questions, background, anything. We're here.
So wonderful. Any announcements?
Yeah, so the announcement that Sandy alluded to a second ago is the Parks and Open Space Master Plan process has been kicking off. That's led by one of the project managers at DPW at the Department of Public Works and our Recreation and Parks Director here at City Hall. They've hired an outside consultant, CRO, to be working on that project, and they have formed an advisory group that consists of a few members of the public, a few committee members, staff people like myself, and all working as sort of a guidance group for the consultant to kind of come to and bounce ideas and drafts and other things off of. And to reach sort of a broader swath of the community instead of just staff or just one committee or something else. Nora raised the idea that because the housing committee is broader than it used to be, and that there's some of the concern is about sort of quality of life in our housing and strong neighborhoods and related things that do relate to both open space and parks, that the housing committee should have a representative on the advisory group. Currently, it's the Natural Resources Committee and the Rec and Parks Committee that have representatives.
And I think public art.
And public art, you're right.
Yeah.
Public art also has representatives. So We were asked to give a name for whoever would like to be that representative. The scheduling email that was sent out, there's a, a poll of which can you meet kind of a thing. Looks like it's generally 11 a.m. or 5 p.m. on a smattering of different days. So I know that may depend on when you're available, may depend. But that's my announcement for that. So it's sort of a twofold announcement. That process is getting moving more than it had been. And the second is that the Housing Committee should have a representative on that advisory group.
I'd be happy to volunteer for that unless someone else wants to do it. I was on the previous open space committee 3
Okay.
years ago, and so there's some history there, and I'd like to take part in it unless someone else wants to do it.
Any other interest?
All right.
Good guy for the job.
Yeah.
Vince.
Excellent.
All in favor?
Yeah, exactly. Unanimously appointed. Great. Otherwise, the planning commission is moving along. The primary project that they're working on right now is the update to the form-based code regulations, Article 8, in the land development regulations. The focus of the update is on tweaking the building envelope standards to both allow it to be more flexible, to allow for some creativity in the architecture, and also to ensure high quality buildings. So it's kind of two sides of a coin that is a little bit hard to thread the needle on. But that's the big thing that they're working on now. And that will, the first draft of some updated language will go into their packet for their next planning commission meeting. That'll be in 2 weeks. So that packet will be available online, hopefully by Thursday of next week. So that's just a quick update on what the planning commission is doing. And part of that conversation actually is also the street layout in the form-based code area, because some of that affects what building facades are allowed to face in what direction, that kind of thing. And also the heights, so allowed heights in different parts of the form-based code area.
And I take it they're not proposing to change the area, or are they?
The boundaries of the
Yeah,
area?
the boundaries.
No.
No.
No,
Okay.
they're not proposing to change the boundaries of the area. There's a few places where in form-based code, there's transects instead of districts. So it's T5, T4, T3.
Mhm.
There are a few places where those lines may change internally to the city center, but not the boundary of the city center form-based code area as a whole.
Any of the things being discussed would make it more difficult or easier to put in housing.
We are trying really hard to make it easier. There are a few things where we're retaining some control over architectural elements, and you can't just put a cinder block box down, but allowing some more creativity in how sites are used, how buildings are designed. Hopefully, or proposing to add a minimum number of floors in some of the transect zones that is higher than what it currently is. There's a few transect zones where there's a minimum of 2, but raising that to 3 and eliminating a 1-story building exception that currently exists. So hopefully, as a whole package, it will enable more flexibility and therefore more housing.
Is this, I remember there have been a number of people, residents, who have expressed they don't like the looks of what's happening in the city center.
Yep.
Is this supposed to address that too?
That's the building envelope standards. Yeah. So the building envelope is everything on the outside of the building. So we're treating it as a few different pieces to it. It's this sort of public interface, like ground floor. What does it look like when you're walking past as a pedestrian? How do you interact with commercial spaces, all of that space? And then how often how are the facades broken up instead of it being, 150 feet of blank wall? What's an effective way to make it more welcoming and more human scale? And how do you do that in a way that doesn't look like a scrapbook? Some of the feedback that we've heard has been, there's things on the buildings that are just you know, because they have to in the regulations, but they don't serve any purpose, that some of the buildings look very similar to the other buildings. Some of that is unavoidable because it's all the same group that's developing it. It's the same development group, it's the same architecture group. So you're not going to necessarily have sort of diversity of architectural thought. But to allow a little more flexibility where we've heard from architects that they've reached pain points where, you know, on paper, it looks like this regulation's flexible and this one's flexible and this one's flexible. But when you draw the Venn diagram of the three, you've actually made a box about that big. So that's something that we've heard from architects is like, yeah, you think you're flexible because all these different standards are not so bad, but when you layer them together, you kind of paint a very small box.
So the interplay is,
Exactly.
doesn't work.
Yep.
So, well-intentioned, these design requirements can sometimes be.
Yep.
Overly restrictive, like,
Yep.
is there a framework of which like, yeah, we don't wanna make it too restrictive to actually have
Yep.
something like. City center doesn't look bad to all people, I
Yep.
think it looks great,
Yep.
and this whole kind of like. Raising the standard is also adds to the expense of.
So I think
Putting up
it's
those buildings.
not necessarily a raising the standard. It's focusing on the things that really make a difference in what the aesthetics of a building, dropping the things that we're regulating now that maybe don't actually have that much effect, but are pinch points for architects. But then also kind of opening that box so there's more flexibility, so that the variability from one building to the next, the chances of them looking similar goes down if they have more options. So trying to put all those pieces together.
Feel pretty comfortable, like this isn't an obstruction.
No.
Policy.
No, that is the opposite of the intention.
I know Cathedral Square had a problem because on the first floor, there was a requirement to have an open doorway,
Yes.
not, within so many feet.
Yep.
And that wasn't really fitting with them. Do you know if that kind of thing's being addressed?
It is being addressed. It is not being eliminated. So Cathedral Square is an interesting situation because they're in the T5 that requires first floor commercial.
Mhm.
So they kind of wiggled their way through to get their approval. So the intention of that sort of doorway spacing is allowing for commercial units to be of a small size, either now or in the future.
Excuse me.
So there've been some discussions about, if you have a larger tenant on the first floor, say like that you're allowed to keep this door and this door open, but this one's allowed to be locked. Like the physical door may still have to be there, but a little more opportunity for tenants as they need to lock maybe every other door if they're of a certain scale or have certain requirements. So that is something that's being examined in the big pile of everything. So that's what the planning commission's up to. And I think that's really what I've got for announcements.
Thank you.
Sure.
Just one quickie.
Mhm.
So I had a chance to be interviewed by 2 UVM journalism students about how I felt about the merger of the committee. Was
Oh,
their initial real question, but we skirted that and just got into the origins of the trust fund and the housing committee. I sent them the original documents. They're writing for the other paper.
okay.
This class has been assigned papers and they're writing. So, and I think Nora had an interview.
I did have a conversation. Yeah. It's been such a long 2 days. It's like back in my head. Like, I'm like, now I'm focused on this moment, but yeah.
They
No,
sent me an email as well, but I didn't respond. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's.
Yeah, I mentioned Sandy, they reached out.
That I didn't.
For historic, so we really talked about the historic nature of when it was started and so on. So the whole combination, I just said, the staffing issue, there's a citizen involvement issue. There's no reason to think that this isn't a good thing, so I don't know quite how they got that particular question, but we skirted around it.
Yeah, they asked me the same question. Did they ask you that question as well? You talked to them as well?
Yeah, I talked to them also.
Yeah. I steered the discussion knowing that you had, which was helpful that you told me what you guys talked about. To more of like that, just because you're not talking about affordable housing being built, affordable housing is woven into all kinds of other issues and equity issues and where things are going to be built and partnering. And, you know, be in connection with other committees and, to this date, we haven't done anything around renters or anything like that, but having it housing could open up some of those if that was a desire, so.
Yeah, I read them from our charge from the city council, so I think that. I thought that covered us.
Yeah, and then I think they asked one question about like. That follow-up of, I think the question that I think they asked you and, as well around that. There's not really a lot of place to develop, right, because of the, certain, I'm like, yeah, there isn't, right, but we want to preserve what the housing we have, there's room for infill. And also that we don't need, and I think you started this conversation a little bit, Vince, about that, it doesn't need to have a tension in between housing and natural resources like this, that's like a false tension, it doesn't have to be at odds with one another.
I don't think I reminded them that 50% of the city is open space.
I sent them maps of the city.
No.
Yeah, I sent them the, from the website, from your website, I sent them that interactive map and,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm like, look, just look at the data, it's there, just like, you can look at this stuff, but, like,
Yeah.
no, I'm really like, that's kind of like, don't trust all of us, like,
Yeah.
we all got our own opinions, but like, really just look, it's I told them it was very interesting, honestly. It's like, this is like cool stuff. Be looking at it, yeah. Hopefully, maybe they'll be coming to all our other stuff, so.
Be interesting to see what they write.
I know, I had to take a deep breath after the whole thing, because I was like, ugh.
Three different voices.
Yeah, I wonder how it's,
Students.
I don't. I just was nervous about it.
This is a journalism course.
It is a journalism
Yeah.
course,
Yeah,
so,
you never knew.
Good job.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, they.
I don't think they even knew it.
No, sad.
No.
Yeah,
Things have changed.
Things
Many
have.
journals, except that.
Okay.
so any other announcements?
No, I was just gonna let people know I copied you on this, but I did forward the presentation you gave at the last meeting we had, along with the resolutions and some of the history, largely in the housing trust, to the rest of council, from an FYI standpoint. So they know that at some point this committee may come back with a work plan for sure, but also recommendation on how to, accept applications for trusts, things like that. So.
Yeah, so. You might want to think about. Yeah, putting that on the agenda maybe, so like if we do get an application, what's our, and I think you were gonna look, well, that was on the agenda
Yeah.
from last time, so, checking, circling back about,
The income,
the
yeah.
income,
We're
yeah,
gonna-
yeah. So just taking a look at the, moving on to the agenda, does somebody want to make a motion to approve the agenda?
I sent a
Minutes?
few,
Or approve the minutes, sorry, yeah,
just semantic sort of corrections to Larry, so. Assuming he thinks they're okay.
Well, no, yeah, I have yet to get incorporated, but I will get.
Okay, well, I'll move that they be approved with corrections.
Seconded.
You want to explain what the corrections are?
I can't remember. There was a period, there was a comma,
No, no,
somebody's name was wrong.
no. The first line says it's about the December meeting. Says the 18th of December, so I asked Larry to make the, right at the top, Larry. Total top,
Oh, 15th of January.
you must have corrected it.
No. I didn't do
Well, that's not what was on my computer.
Ah.
I'm right here, Wednesday, 18th of December.
that. Okay,
All right, so with those types of corrections,
Then there was misspelling of your name, and there was a word that was in that should have been is.
all in favor of approving the minutes from last meeting? Okay, the ayes have it. Okay.
Hi.
Right, thank you, everyone. So fair housing update, we've got an email from Vince around kind of the book, our book event, discussion event, and then, Mary and I did some communicating around CDO, but I wanna also open up the discussion of what else we wanna talk about besides, having for the fair housing month, besides the book, discussion.
Do we have a date for that?
Well, I was going to say, she has, Kelsey put me in contact with her. We went back and forth. She suggests April 2nd to 16th or the 30th would be the best dates if we'd like to do a Wednesday evening. Now, in the past, we've done a Wednesday evening and then canceled one of these meetings. I don't know if we want to do that. But those would be the three possibilities that she's suggesting.
That was the second.
2nd, 16th, and the 30th, the best dates if you'd like to do a Wednesday evening. And they're still gonna close the library at 7, but she'll show one of us how to make sure everyone's out, and then we can knock the library up at 8. And that would be fine. She said they can buy 5 copies of this book, and assuming that we're still on track for that one. Or maybe 10. She appreciated it being such an inexpensive book. And I'd written to Jess Hyman about participating with us, and she hasn't responded yet. So we would be the host. She said this year we would be the formal host, not the library, I guess. But she said what hosting means, the committee would provide a flyer. I can send you a high-res version of our logo and so forth, and they'll help promote the event on their website and publicize by posting flyers widely and getting the word out through other channels, the other paper, social media, if you have that email list as appropriate. Someone from your committee would set up the room if you want and so forth. The library would post flyers in the library neighborhood, put on social media, 7 days calendar. So she's got some other things that would be nice. I think that's all very good if people still want to do it. Do you want to pass this around some more? It's got about 20 chapters that Jerusalem Demsas has written. They're not exactly written as chapters, but it's a combination of articles she's written for The Atlantic. She's maybe the first under age 30 staff writer for The Atlantic. That'd be very nice to get a younger person. She's also an Ethiopian refugee. She came here when she was 3. And I learned that online from looking her up a little more. And if you want to look her up online, if you look up her name and then go to The Atlantic, you don't need a subscription to The Atlantic to read a bunch of her other articles. I just read or I listened to an hour-long podcast between her and a professor, I've forgotten where, who just wrote some new stuff and finished a lot of research on NIMBYism. And really a little more interesting than I thought. And so, and that was 2025. She's got another thing on housing in 2025 already. And, but these go from 2002 to 2024. And they're quite independent. Let me read you a couple of the titles of the chapters. It would be up to us to suggest to readers what we think they should read. And sometimes it's better to have, a big idea in a small chapter that we can all access and talk about. Here's a couple of, the first chapters are interesting. One's called Local Government Has Too Much Power. Housing breaks people's brains. Community input is bad, actually. One of her themes.
Oh, there goes my job. Great.
No, you're big in here. You're
I'm all right.
You're
Okay, okay.
That's very good.
What planning professionals rule.
Oh, yes. I got my own chapter.
There's one on a billionaire's dilemma about a guy, Cisco's has more of a Western focus. Who said, we've got to build, and then someone suggested building in his neighborhood. He said, no. But anyway, that's an interesting chapter, but why America doesn't build. And there's one on trees, not very good. Americans vote too much, and that's like community input is bad, actually. It's like that chapter that says, and as we know, and we've seen in other books we've read from our common knowledge, there's housing is very much a local issue. And it takes a very small number of people, as we know, to stop a project. And in here, she describes the type of people who typically like to stop projects in spite of the fact that they say, yes, we need more housing, but anyway, yeah, it's a nice chapter on all of the things we bring to a vote, and people have no idea what they're voting on. And we have so few elected representatives elected by such a tiny number of people. I'm not sure this is the best system of democracy. Certainly when it comes to an important thing like housing. And I think that would be a nice idea to put on the table with the public and discuss with them. Another chapter is meet the latest housing crisis scapegoat. Another one on the real villain in the gentrification story. What's causing black flight? The right to move is under attack. The people who hate us. The root cause of the homelessness crisis. And the obvious answer to homelessness, which of course, build. So I think that the back third are not as germane to us, but I think all of the others are pretty good. We'll see if Jess wants to help us with it. If not, we'll get one of us to lead the discussion and maybe suggest on those flyers. Let's look at this chapter, that chapter. Yeah, unfortunately, they're not numbered, so it's harder.
Where did you get your copy?
Pardon?
Did you buy it online or
I
something?
bought it online, $11. I've actually read it on the $4 Kindle version. And so, that's pretty accessible, especially if the library's willing to buy 10 copies of it. What do you think? Is that a good book that we should do? And
I think it sounds really
Yes.
thought-provoking. I think it sounds wonderful. Yeah, I think it sounds really good.
Jess was good with it.
Haven't heard.
Haven't heard back from it yet.
And just for reference, at Phoenix Books, it would be $12.95, but you would have to order it in. They don't have it in stock currently.
Okay.
But if it's something that we're moving forward with, like I don't, Vince or me, like I think we could reach out and say like, this is something that we're doing at South Burlington. If you wanted to pull in a couple of copies, we could pretty much guarantee you'd sell them. I'll buy one.
Oh,
Yeah.
and maybe if they even want to sell a few more, we could put a little poster there of, this is
Yeah.
hosting a
Yep.
a public discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a little edge to her writing that frequently Atlantic writers do. They're always very smart as a whip, obviously. I was listening to her interview this professor, and I kept checking the settings. This must be at 1.25, 1.5. This isn't going to be, it's supposed to be 55 minutes, I guess. This is going to be done in 35 minutes. No, it took 55 minutes or well, talking faster than this, I now understand it. So if that's okay with people, I can.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. to move
Okay.
forward on.
How about a date then?
Let's see.
I'm gonna be out of country on the 30th.
Okay,
Okay, so
But
that's,
don't let that stop.
okay, okay.
Scotland.
Ah,
Beautiful.
Nice.
I'll be out of state on the 30th as well.
Okay, so
okay.
we should cross out the
Oh,
30th.
When's school vacation? Because that would be more like.
That's like the 21st.
21st, okay, so that
Think so.
takes, yeah,
I'll double check, but
Okay.
that should be
so maybe, what about mid-month or,
the 16th.
let's do the
The
mid-month,
16th?
yeah. And that does keep us off of our regular meeting. In terms of, and it wouldn't be till 7, right?
I think so. Or maybe 6 to 8. We've done it 2 hours in the past, I think. Haven't we?
yeah, I think at 6 to 8.
6 to 8, okay, I'm trying to remember, yeah.
Chris, when do you have school board?
I am officially had my last school board meeting,
Oh,
last week, and I skipped the informational session this evening because it was, a repeat.
okay.
And I'm freed up.
So you're back to us
Wow.
again.
But you
Back-
could be appointed, they still need someone, or you could be the subject of writing, they only requires 30 days.
Wow.
In the article,
Hopefully I haven't upset 30 people that would write that.
but in the article in the paper, one of the candidates, her daughter wants to run. And she's 21 or 22 or
Yeah,
something.
she's a UVM sophomore, I guess.
Why not?
Sure.
Why not, you know, is
Um,
there something wrong with mother and daughter being school board members?
Confirming April 21st to 25th is South Burlington Schools April break.
All right, so day after tax day, right? April
Yeah.
16th.
Sure.
Everybody will be, you know, in a calmer mood, hopefully, right? Yeah, yeah, they were saying, so we'll do April 6th. And do you feel like we need, I mean, well, let's keep talking about fair housing. I'm just thinking like spreading some of the tasks around in terms of, you know, publicity and putting up posters and things like
Promotion and
that.
stuff,
Yeah,
yeah.
promotion and stuff. So so it's not, and then it sounds like a number of us will be there. I can be there. Can I be there?
I was unclear, all those things that you read, are those things the library is gonna do or things they want us to
They want
do?
us to do.
Provide a flyer, I can send you a high-res version of our logo to
Yeah.
include on the flyer.
Yeah, that's no
So we-
problem, but
we could do it,
it
right.
was the rest.
And well, they will help with other things, but they like us to do the flyer. Someone from the committee would help set up the room. I mean, it's no
Yeah,
problem.
That's what I did last
And then
year.
close up afterwards, and that's no problem for anyone.
Vince, was it in the community room? Was that the plan?
Yeah,
I.
that's where it was.
Okay.
So, but all that stuff about posting and 7 days calendar, they said they would do that. Is
Yeah,
that
that's-
correct?
They want us to do it.
The library, we post flyers here and there in the library, on our social media and on our website events calendar, submit to 7 days calendar and possibly promote on front.
Oh, they
That's
would
all-
do
They'll
that.
do that.
That's at the library.
The other way clear.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the library one.
And
That's great.
I'm happy to put it out through other city channels, you know,
Okay.
the city news, email
Uh-huh.
newsletter, the website, et cetera. I can,
From Porch can you?
Yep.
Porch for the whole city?
yep, I can take care of
That's
that.
good.
And then I can send it to CVEO.
CVOEO.
CVOEO.
Yeah, there's another letter. It's just fun, more fun to say.
Yeah, CVOEO.
Okay, so we gotta hear from Jess. We've got to firm that up, see if we leave that discussion or not.
But they have a calendar, they also have a calendar for Fair Housing Month. That we could put it on.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Someone want to volunteer to do to get the flyer ready? I said they provide the flyer, they send us the version,
The logo they
the
provide.
logo.
Yeah.
I can do that. I'm gone for the next 2 weeks. But after that,
Do they want it earlier than that? Cause,
It'll be out by the beginning of March, right?
okay, yeah. Okay,
I'll be back March 3rd.
third.
I think that's probably sufficient for this length of book, and about 6 weeks ahead of time is probably pretty good.
What was the name and author again?
Jerusalem Demsas, DEMSAS is the author's name, and it's called On the Housing Crisis.
Thank you.
And do we want to host anything else for the Fair Housing Month or put up any other displays? Any thoughts around? I mean, it's fine to do a book discussion. I'm not saying that it's not enough, but I'm just wondering if we want to host anything else. Or put something.
We need to do our fair housing proclamation again.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
City council.
Okay.
And
then did we-
Last year, didn't we just sort of plug in new dates?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Kind of a reaffirmation of.
Yeah, what we've said in the past, or what we've asked the city council to say.
Yeah, and I can track down that document from Jesse
Okay.
through the city council records, just in case it's not in our other records. Oh, okay. Between us, we will find it.
Pass this around for the, it's on the CBO website, has to do with regional housing convening. That's not over there.
Is
Is
that
that
the
this
CR?
year?
I hope it's this year.
Is that the CRPC one?
Yeah, the regional planning commission.
Yeah,
Um. But Thursday, April 18th, if April 16th is Wednesday, then Thursday isn't April 18th. Or if
Well, that's
Thursday
a good
is
question.
April 18th,
I'll have to look.
Wednesday
April-
is 9.
April 16th is a Wednesday.
I went to there, is this at Hula? Hula?
That might have been last year.
That's last year. Because it was the same night as our workshop and I
Well,
was the only one that.
their website is a little challenging, yeah, it's dated, yeah. Yeah,
That's,
yeah, there's
that's
a lot of
last year.
stuff, that's why I was surprised when you looked at it, that there was actually stuff for this year on.
Yeah,
it.
if you click on
Yeah,
register now, it says 2024.
yeah,
Figure that's when you run into a row. If you click register and you try, well, that's when it'll tell you the time, the date is wrong.
well, is there an appetite to kind of do any more presentations or any displays or any resources? What's what more? Anything else?
The stuff that you worked on last year, is that worth taking out of the closet and reposting in the library?
You mean for the ADUs? Or just that the
Maybe the
display?
year before it was at the folding display.
I have that, I got that back from Janet, yeah, so it's literally in my car right now, actually, but so I have that, and I'm just wondering if we want to either put something on our website or have more things on our web, I'm just wondering if we want to be more visible, I guess, in terms of picking up a topic and either having an evening on it or just having information in the library or posted or things like that.
Wonder. Was, the only thing that occurred to me was renters and the rental registry. Is there anything? But it's hard to reach renters to come and. Do they have a place to? You know,
Yeah,
deal with any complaints? Or,
yeah, I don't know if you mean in terms of the city?
yeah,
I'm not aware of anything within the city. CVOEO does does workshops for renters, and I was thinking, I did call them, I haven't heard back from them. That maybe we could host, if there was room in the library or an open time, that maybe we could host a
renters. forum, but
some type of educational thing that they're the folks with
They
the
do it.
knowledge, yeah,
Yeah.
they would do it, I think. I don't have it all worked out, but because I sent them an email and was like, can you send me more information or? So I have to kind of chase that down a little bit more, but it would be, I think it would be nice to do something along the lines of renters. I'm not sure what that would look like or how we would reach people. I guess the same way,
Mhm.
I mean, there's renters all around us, right? So.
Be early to get a rental registry report from city rental registry. That's sort of brand new.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Where it is along that could be a report to us, really, just to hear how things are going
Yeah, yeah,
in the first year.
that would be great, yeah.
but I like the idea of us hosting. CVO doing a workshop, whatever their standard workshop is for renters.
Mhm. Okay.
I like, you know. They're sort of a neglected population in our efforts, I think.
Yeah, I think that would open up a lot of things and just again, just like the ADU forum last year. And publicize it, see what happens, maybe there'll be like 3 people and maybe there'll be a room full, but.
I do think next year an update, because the rental registry hasn't been in effect for very
Right,
long
yeah.
yet, but. I know council's interested in at least an annual report on, what issues are coming up, what, is there commonality, things like that.
Yeah, I think its official date was April 1st last year, but they have to get everybody to register. They may still be doing that. With all
I'm
the
sure that's
thousands of
happening, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
rental
I think
units.
when I talked to Steve Locke, it was sort of one of the first waves was sort of people self-selecting and self-reporting. So I asked him, so how will you find out other? And he goes, we're gonna watch the rent ads, and
Mhm.
I'm sure there's other ways to do that, but I think that'll be an evolving process.
It's early for them to be more public about it.
Oh, and just as a note, Fair Housing Month is April, but nothing restricts this committee from only holding events in April.
True.
So if it turns out that, August is a better time or November or whatever, like it's having ideas for other events is always helpful. And it doesn't mean because it's February now that if you can't pull it off by April, that it's dead till next April.
Yeah.
Just.
So if I get a response that feels like it's feasible, right, from CVOEO, would, just in terms of like process, in terms of the committee, if we March that I'd be bringing it back. How much could we communicate via email about just as a potential date? Can we do that kind of?
I think you can do it on dates.
Can we do it?
Date, that's where it gets tricky. It's like
Yeah.
dates, but not like a decision to hold an event.
Okay.
So like if you heard back from them and it was about like, hey, what does everyone think about holding the event? That gets,
Okay.
but if it was like you decided at this meeting that you were going to hold the event and then the email was
Around dates.
is it, April 3rd or April 12th? Like
Yeah.
it's a hard,
Yeah.
it's a silly kind of line between
No, I
public
know.
and
That's why
not.
I'm asking the question, because there'd be 2 decisions, really. There would be a decision about what content, right? Because I'm
Mhm.
guessing there's more than one rental topic, right, that they could speak on. And then it would be, of course, the date.
Yeah, well, you'd be meeting on March 12th,
Mhm.
which when it's not a book thing, if it was in April, especially in the middle to end of April, I think a month's notice is still pretty good.
Yeah. And then.
And you can do work with CVOEO about setting up, things.
Okay. And then again, back to the idea, like if it floats into May, it's not a crisis.
It will be
Yeah.
fine. Everything.
Yeah.
Megan, did you hear that?
Yeah, I totally agree with Kelsey. It's like we could have events whenever. I don't think we should feel contained to just April. And I do know CVOEO, I think they have at least 2 different types of workshops that they offer. And they also, I think recently came up with one, this series of videos that were with CHT that were very, like culturally, like they're all in different languages and they're kind of things that, sometimes we don't think about if, in our mainstream culture, but for a lot of, new Americans, which interestingly, people in Maine call New Mainers, which I thought was kind of a cool, like more welcoming way. Anyhow, yeah, I lost my train of thought there, but yeah, it's more about things that they might not know about renting. It could be even as simple as like putting a pan on the oven and not just putting food straight on it. And I think that might be relevant in this neighborhood too, especially Garden down the street. Definitely has a lot of like diversity in its composition. So I just another kind of random idea that maybe they could facilitate.
Yeah, Megan, I think that's, and everybody, that would, I think those are also good resources to know about. When we've talked for a second about the website and what do we post on the website and all those things. So I guess that's another announcement. If you haven't noticed, the city has recently got a new website. So a lot of old things were cleaned out and everybody was sort of standardized on what the committee's sites look like. It's not a sort of forum style repository for every link to every housing related article that anyone ever comes across, but something like videos from CVOEO, like I'm totally comfortable with that being something that's posted as a housing resource on the Housing Committee's sort of sub page, or potentially sort of cross-linked with, other, welcome to South Burlington, like what do you need to know about living in Chittenden County or whatever. So that's always an option that is sort of, the timing can be whenever and is a little independent from having an event, but we don't need to reinvent the wheel every time you want to provide some new educational opportunities.
Sounds good. Okay, so I'm gonna follow up with CBO, and then we can kind of talk, we do have the webpage at the end of the meeting as a discussion of priority, and so we can talk a little bit more about that then, and then kind of expand of, it's, so really what we're really thinking about is what do we wanna, if we hold an event where, even if it's not during fair housing, how do we, that it feels like we wanna target renters since we haven't really done much around that.
So the only other thing what I was going to add about that is we are actually wrapping up a project to developing an equity in planning outreach toolkit. It came from sort of planning funding from the state, so it's planning sort of geared at the moment, but the way we had it written and we're worked with our consultants to do this is that it's kind of usable by anybody. It is comprehensive, so it's quite long. But I would be very happy to kind of run this kind of communication through that matrix and sort of see where we land on, is it physical posting at the, Shaw's on Shelburne Road? Is it, sending it out through the emails? Like how do you reach certain groups of people? That's the idea for that kind of resource. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
That sounds
so,
great.
and it's not something that necessarily every committee needs to have. How do we reach these people? Like we're hoping that this is the beginning of a framework
Yeah,
that we can have more confidence in those decisions.
yes, thank you.
Mhm.
Do you think in looking at renters, about 50% of the city are renters?
Yeah.
Like that, that's right. So
Yep.
do you think we'd find that of that 50%, we're making up a number here, 70% live in 15 buildings?
It's
And
probably
gonna
not
be-
quite as high as 70%, but it's
It's getting there.
a good number. Yeah, with these new buildings, it's probably getting there.
Yeah.
Before these, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4 that are occupied. Maybe 5 now that are
Then
occupied.
they're the ones behind Shaw's.
Right, 6.
There's 3 more getting built on.
There's 2 more being built, 3 more in different stages of the construction. I think there's 8 or 9 in this area. Farrell Street is behind Shaw's and there's 4 or 5 large buildings there. Larkin, yep, the Olympiad building back behind there. And then it depends what you're talking about. Like if there's a lot of townhouses, that are larger buildings, but they're 8 townhouses or whatever it is. So, and then O'Brien and Summit Properties are building 4 or 6, 4 buildings, 6 buildings. There's at least 2 under construction, if not completed, 2 more that are being permitted. I'm showing I'm not the development planner. I think there's 2 more, or there's at least 2 more lots.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
You're talking about O'Brien Farms?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so there are 2 already there and
Mhm.
occupied.
Mhm.
And so how many more?
That have been currently in the permitting process at some stage either 2 or 4. I can't remember which, because they're having to rework some of their.
Uh-huh.
So the radius of 4 miles,
Yep,
talking about
yep,
a big chunk of
yep.
All
Yeah.
interests, yeah, absolutely.
getting
Yeah.
back to your ratio there.
Yeah.
But all of the buildings that we've just mentioned have been built since 2000. Give or take.
I think so.
Farrell Street would have been the earliest, and that was around the year 2000.
I'm Eastwood's Commons, I think those are condos.
It's across from the high school.
Yeah, no, all the buildings behind those are not rentals.
No, summer condos.
Yeah, I think Eastwood's, I'm
Yeah.
almost certain it's condos.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mhm.
Include me into the ratio.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So. Talking about 1, 2, 3, 4 buildings. And each building has 8 apartments. So we're talking about
32.
32,
All are
around 30-ish.
Technically renters, it's senior housing, but it's rental.
Oh, yeah.
So
So,
that kind of assessment of rented properties or units, I think would be helpful, and that those won't all show up through the rental registry right away. I wonder if.
Those are
there's
the
an
easy
opportunity-
ones, though, to identify.
those are the easy ones
Yeah.
to see.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
might be nice to have, I was thinking about, based on city plan, there's a target number of housing units in
Yep.
there, and I don't think it's excluding, it's ownership and rental, I think, but to sort of map out sort of where there has been expansion, but it might be interesting to just sort of, as we get more data, to map out
Yeah.
the rental.
Reminded me of
Yeah,
2
that's
other
right.
announcements that I have forgotten. One, the city has recently hired a data manager. So she has been sort of phasing in to her position here. Her name is Anna. And are posting, and I don't know where they are in that process, potentially interviewing for another for a GIS technician or GIS person, expert.
Excellent.
So more capacity for data and geographic data analysis is in the works. Yep.
Well, it's something that occurs to me in this discussion is with so many buildings new, like the challenge is there's such varied, I mean, there's a lot of diversity in housing, right? So you've got these really new buildings that may not have like the same issues as a lot of the old buildings in Burlington, right? But there's probably older buildings or older apartment situations
Mhm.
within South Burlington because
Yep.
of just the development patterns.
It's just a different, it's a different shape,
Yeah,
right?
it's just a
Like,
different shape, yeah.
most of the length of Kennedy Drive, all of the condos and townhouses that are in that area were built in the 80s,
Mhm.
80s to 90s. So some of those are ending, they're sort of in the cycle of needing reinvestment.
Yeah.
Same with, oh, now I'm blanking, but across from the high school, that whole
Yes,
area.
There's a Commons.
Yeah.
Dorset Commons,
Yep.
yep. So there are a good number of multifamily of different types of housing around the city that were built in the 70s through 90s that are ripe for sort of reinvestment. And then we have this sort of wave of much larger apartment style buildings. And then sprinkled through everywhere is, duplexes, triplexes, full house, single family home rentals.
Condos, people renting out their condos.
Yep, the village
Yeah.
at Dorset
Yeah.
Park is up and behind Veterans Memorial Park, and there's a good number.
HOAs too will have rental caps, so
Yeah.
that might be another get
Mhm.
And
Great.
And guess what's driving the prices going up?
Yeah,
If you have buildings
yeah,
Mhm.
that, okay, they're gonna set some minimum rental dollar amount, XYZ. The other guy who's like 50 years old apartment's like, well, I can jump up there, there's a lot of demand. Yeah, that's what's going on, basically,
Mhm. Mhm.
the new buildings practically driving the old buildings prices to go up.
well,
Wow.
hopefully what it means is that the supply is also going up, and that'll even out at some point, but I am not an economist. So,
Well,
I see that because I live in
Mhm.
50+ years old apartment. And if I move out there, the landlord will fix it and rent it 1.5 times to match something around in the area. So if in the area is like 16, 17, whatever dollar, 100, a two-bedroom apartment, he will come close to that and say, hey, by the way, we are competitive in the market. Here's the prices. That's what's happening.
But I
Yeah.
hope it sounds like he's not doing that to you.
No, because
Well, you've been there and you're a good tenant, I'll bet.
a good, yeah, I'm a grandfather and in the apartment. It's like, but if I move out, the next person will
Yeah.
hike the rental price,
is there anything else needs to be discussed about Fair Housing Month?
no.
Just,
Do we need to move to authorize or to ask Nora to contact OEO and get some options and some
No,
dates?
no,
that are
just sort of
workable?
information gathering. She
okay.
can do that as the chair. That's, I'm comfortable with that.
All right, so, oh, LDR changes.
It's me. This one. Share it. Now it's not showing because I put it over
That's
here.
cool.
It's just the background, just the default background. Now I have to move.
fantastic.
Oh, thanks. Okay. All right, this is very not beautiful, but it is, gets the job done. Recent LDR updates, November of 2024, City Council adopted LDR updates that were partially in response to changes at the state level and partially kind of taking those and right-sizing them and adapting them and using them as a springboard to make further changes in South Burlington. So the intention, these are just my highlights slide of why these changes were made and kind of the buckets of what goals they're meeting. So streamlining regulations and process, that is something that can encourage housing, and this is all through the lens of housing. There are a lot of things in these regulation changes, but this is where the meat is for housing. So streamlining regulations and process makes it faster, makes it cheaper, makes it, fewer requirements, they have to pay the engineers less, et cetera, to get housing happening. Reducing dimensional requirements, generally speaking across the board, dimensional requirements, so lot size, setbacks, things like that have been reduced. Regulate, now it's under the thing, but that's okay. Regulate by building type. And I'll get into it in a little bit, but building type is things like a single family home, a duplex, a triplex, a multifamily, whatever. Increasing flexibility. All of these things go towards increasing the flexibility in people who want to build more housing. Sort of, as we've said before in a previous conversation about city center, these don't apply. This is not city center. This is everywhere else.
That's right, yeah.
But increasing the flexibility by opening up the regulations a bit allows for people to thread the needle a little easier. And the idea is, the big idea, it should be bigger than the others really, is increasing the housing stock through infill. That's the big focus of this, is that we have a lot of inefficiently used land that can be used for more housing in various different forms. So just the first thing that's a major backbone is the consolidation of zoning districts. We now have 4 zoning districts that allow housing: the low scale neighborhood, the medium scale neighborhood, the higher scale mixed use, and Queen City Park because it's its own thing. Thank you, Larry. Yeah. So then I always I tend to refer to them as LSN, MSN, and HSMU, which I made up, and they're the worst acronyms, but here we are. And then the list on the right is the zoning districts that we had before that have been consolidated to the zoning districts on the left. So big point, there are a lot over there. There are 4 over here. Generally speaking, LSN is anything that had a regulated density of 4 units an acre or less. MSN is in the 7 to 12 zone. There were little bits and pieces that could change that, like TDRs and other things, affordable housing bonuses and stuff. So that's an approximate, but it's those districts. And then higher scale mixed use is what you see here, generally densities from 12 to 15, primarily along Shelburne Road. And then Swift and Allen are sort of spurs off of Shelburne Road. So those have been consolidated. Things that remain unconsolidated, C2 was not consolidated, but that is because of commercial uses, like what commercial uses are allowed or not allowed. It has the same regulatory restrictions as HSMU, and the same is true for C1 auto. We kept C1 auto separate to prevent any further proliferation of car dealerships. So it had to have another district that was related to car dealerships, and so we could prohibit it other places. But any housing built in those districts have the same regulations as HSMU. This is regulation. So talk about regulation by building type. I gotta get back over here because I have a little box that's making me hard to read things. Okay.
It doesn't have those.
I don't know what it's doing.
Anymore. You okay in the last one?
I don't know. Regulation by building type. Previously, it was regulated by units per acre. So a single unit, a single family home, could be 4 on a single unit in the R4, for example. Now it is regulated because for a quadplex, a 4-plex building doesn't need 4 times the amount of land as a single family home. It was an inefficient use of land. It made multifamily housing stick out more because it has a big open field next to it. So we shifted it to regulate by building type instead of by district. So it's not density and it's not district, it's minimum lot size and building type. What that does mean is anywhere that a single family home is allowed, so it is not allowed in the higher scale mixed use area, for example, but anywhere a single family home is allowed, it has the same minimum lot size. So if you built it in Butler Farms, or you built it in Chamberlain, or you built it on Spear Street, those would all have the same minimum lot size. It also allows the same lot for 1 to 4 unit building types. So a single family, a duplex, 3 or 4, that is a state requirement now. It only maps directly onto ours because it's a state requirement for anywhere served by water and sewer. Effectively in South Burlington, everywhere served by water and sewer is open for development as required by state law. And anywhere not served by water and sewer is highly, highly limited in what kind of residential you can include. It's 1 to 10 acres or 3 to 15 acres. Like it's very limited, anything that is not served by water and sewer. So for most intents and purposes, anywhere that you can put a single family home, you can put a 4-plex. Yeah.
The area is not served by water and sewer.
Yeah.
Southeast quadrant,
Yep.
Heinsberg Road.
Yep.
Where else?
Anything that's NRP. So served by water, it ends up looking like kind of a squiggly thing. It's mostly the southeast quadrant. Things like the middle of the golf course, things like the areas around the neighborhoods by the golf course, the southern end of Heinsberg Road, some along Cheese Factory Road.
And second one, I remember when I was here.
Yep, Van Sicklin. Yep. Yep. Yeah, so it's primarily in the southeast quadrant, but it is a little squiggly looking. Is
For
not
resource protection.
Yes. Yep. So if you have 1 lot size for anything for 4, medium multis have a larger requirement, which I'll be able to show you on the next slide. And then there's no minimum lot size for large multifamily buildings. That's for a couple of reasons. Number 1, they are only allowed in the higher scale mixed use area anyway. So that's where we want the most sort of efficient land use. And second, we have other regulations that limit the size of a building. Things like stormwater regulations, lot coverage, building coverage on the lot. If you want to build a building of a certain size, if you have to have a certain lot for the same reasons. It's kind of like what I was saying before, you know, you don't need to throw another layer on the Venn diagram when it's already covered sufficiently by other things. So this is a small, a zoomed out and fairly blurry version of this, but I was putting this together actually this afternoon. But as the important points are residential and commercial districts, that is everything that you just saw. These are all sort of the specialized districts that do not allow housing. There are also commercial districts in here that, that don't allow, no, that's not right. These are all the ones that don't allow housing. But if you go and you say, okay, I want to build a small multifamily, I need 5,000 square feet, here are the numbers as I'm going across. We have not changed the heights, so those will be worked on. It's overly complicated now. But for the most part, if you have 5,000 square feet, you can do anything 4 units or smaller, and you need 9 for a medium multi, and you don't need anything, there's no minimum lot size, but there is functionally a minimum lot that you can put 13 units on. So we don't put a number on it, but there is sort of a practical result. So that's the big table.
What's the lot coverage?
Lot coverage is everything, buildings plus driveway, patio, anything else, basically impervious surface.
Parking lots.
Yeah, parking lots, etc.
Now, what are those triple asterisks after those 15s on all those rear? That's setback, right?
Yes, those are setback. And why are there asterisks on that? I'll have to look at exactly what that note
okay.
says, but it is something
I
about.
was wondering if it meant
Yeah.
it being under consideration for change. Or
Nope, there's
something.
a specific note about it that we had to put in
Oh.
a clarification on. And it's similar to sort of like the side yard setback, 0 or 5. It's 0 because they're townhouses and divided duplexes, so you can stick them next to each other because they're attached. The word AFS is average front setback. So if you're in over time, all these things have changed. You could live in a neighborhood where the average front setback of your neighbors is only 18 feet. So you don't need to be stuck at 20 feet if everybody else is at 18. So that's something that we also added. There's a lot in here, but I'm going to explain a bit of it as we go. And if there's any further questions, we can come back to it. Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking about lot size, lot
Yeah.
coverage.
Yep.
And the 15 where it says accessory, is that a
Accessory
setback?
building.
Okay.
So like you have a detached garage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, okay. And so the lot coverage,
Mhm.
is that an increase in?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. So this is how I describe this collection of things. Use of lots. You own a lot. How has your ability to use that lot changed from the previous to the current, to the now? And what's the effect on housing? So we reduce the minimum lot sizes. Previously, the minimum lot sizes were much more than this. And as I said, were by unit. So for multifamily, it got much more. It kind of went up from there. This allows more residential lots in existing neighborhoods to subdivide into 2 lots, particular areas that have a 1/4 acre lots or more. So things like Butler Farms, there'd be more lots that are able to be subdivided than something like the orchards. There are still lots in the orchards that can be subdivided, but it's just not as many as in Butler Farms.
It's subdivided not only for an ADU, but for a full.
True
separate
subdivision.
house. Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
true
Are you
subdivision.
expecting to see many of those in places like Butler Farms?
We don't know. We'll see. It's a little bit funny because it's hard to know because lot shape plays into it. Some of them, if you're on the outside of a curve, you might have a very narrow sort of driveway and then a large lot in the back. Where your house is on the lot plays into it. If you're 50 feet from the road and then you have a house and then there's 50 feet behind you, then it's harder to fit things in. We're hoping that allowing people to do it will at least have people think about it, and potentially either now or in 15 years, it's something that will be happening over time. We're not necessarily anticipating, some big league turnover in the next 2 years. But having this as an opportunity now or in the future opens it up and also allows people potentially to stay in their homes if they weren't otherwise going to be able to. You know, if you can, you know, sell a back lot or subdivide, build a house and sell a house behind your house, that's a big chunk of income for someone who is maybe retired and wants to stay in their home and they want to stay in one house. It's a big asset to be able to subdivide a back piece.
But they could also convert their house
Yep.
to a fourplex,
Yep.
right?
All these things, yes.
So they could make themselves a small
Yep.
condo or whatever and rent the rest.
Yep. Yeah, so that's all these things on this
Yeah.
lot. So reduced minimum lot size is reduced setbacks. So it went reduced to 5 feet on the side in many cases. Reduced frontage requirements, allowing multiple structures on a lot. You can have up to 3 small residential structures on principal structures on a single lot without subdividing. So that effectively expands what you were able to do with an ADU that had size limitations and other things, that now you could just have 2 principal homes on a lot if you own 2 acres or less. The idea is if you own 2 acres or more, you're probably able to subdivide, and that's a sort of more fungible use of the future property. Increasing the lot coverage by a little bit. It's not by a ton, it's about by about 10% in most cases. By 10 percentage points, not by 10%. And then also you're allowed to convert your home to a different building type. So you have a large single family home. You could previously create an ADU inside your home, and that was allowed, but it had those same size limitations. You could now convert it to up to a fourplex on the same lot that you're already on. So this is just an example, just pulling this out. Say there's a single family home in the Orchards, just as an example, because I needed a district and a type of home. The old regulation was R4, the new is LSN. The minimum lot size has been reduced by 47%, the side setback by 50%, the front setback by 33%, the rear setback by 50%, and then building coverage has increased, lot coverage has increased, and the number of principal buildings you can have has also increased. So the big framework of all of these things is you have more room. You have more places, and maybe your lot is a weird shape. Maybe you have some wetlands, maybe you have whatever the concern is. Maybe you have a steep slope, maybe you have something. All of this just makes it more likely that you'd be able to do something with your lot than it was before.
So building is like coverage is buildings.
Actual buildings.
And lot coverage is adds in like the
Parking
driveway,
lots,
the
driveway,
parking,
yeah.
okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
We did talk about having those be the same number, but then there was a concern that someone would build a very small house and a very large parking lot. Which, okay, it's possible, but you know, we kept it separate. Yeah.
Is the state requiring that like the South Burlington's take regs have to be passed back to them for approval?
So any LDR changes does have to be given back to the state, but they don't have to approve them. It's something that they are notified of like, this is what we've done. And if they see something that's like truly illegal, they could probably come back to us and be like, you needed it to be 6 and you put 12 or whatever it is. But otherwise it's not something that needs to be approved. It's the same as any other state statute. Yeah.
So have these are in effect now?
Yeah.
Okay.
As of November.
Any tests, anything come forward that's testing any of this?
Nothing that I know of. There have been some inquiries about people subdividing lots or creating duplexes, or there is one lot that someone has inquired about a few times. I don't know if they've actually come in for an application where there is already a duplex. So they were maxed out at what they were before, but adding this, they could put another duplex on the back of the lot.
I think that wasn't there also some refinement in ability to protest, ability to take all this to court.
Yes,
So
at the state level,
that's
there.
not in the LDR.
No.
That's in the state
Yes.
legislation about.
Yeah,
process, right?
the process of how many people are required to bring a citizen sort of appeal of a project have been changed. It's been tightened up a bit. I don't remember the exact words, but you have to be kind of more affected than you used to be. And there has to be more people involved, one or the other.
On
Yeah.
the housing bill that we're gonna look at makes that even higher. I mean,
Yeah.
proposes to make that higher.
Right.
20% of the population.
I know.
That's a big jump. Yeah, 4,000 people.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I mean.
I think
right?
that's
Yeah.
a bargaining
Yeah. So
position.
another example, just for fun, a 10-unit building somewhere on Kennedy Drive. So it was the old R7, it's now in the MSN. Previously, it was 6,000 square foot per unit. You needed 60,000 square feet. Now you need 9. And on my asterisk here, I wrote it out, see? This is not a guarantee that a building will fit. So we had some feedback before, there's like, well, you can't fit a 12-unit building on 9,000 square feet. And I said, yeah, probably not. There might be an ideal scenario that
That's about the other
a 3-floor building, that's a, you know, there are nice looking buildings that are 4 apartments on each floor. That's sort of a 12 cube, potentially, but including parking, including stormwater. It would be difficult to get down to 9,000 square feet, but kind of dropping the number below, sort of into the realm of, out of the realm of possibility, into the impossibility, makes it so that basically if you can fit it, you can build it. So these
Or
are,
if you lift it and you have the ground levels of parking.
you can also do that.
Yes, yes.
Yep, they've done,
First levels.
there's some buildings in Winooski that have done that. There's some buildings in Burlington
This
that
way,
have
you
done
know,
that.
you can have that
Yep,
s-
yep.
Space.
Yep, so there's a lot of things that are like that, and then I just wanted to point out with the larger building types, the side setback and rear setback have remained the same, with the intention that they're likely taller, so you don't necessarily want it 5 feet from a property line, and 10 is probably fine. What else did I want to say about this? Lot coverage, building coverage went up. And then this is what we mean by small building types. The 4 units and smaller are small building types. You can't mix small building types with other building types. Like you can't have a 12-plex and a duplex on the same lot. But there's actually no limit on the number of principal buildings that are not small. So you could have a commercial building and a 12-plex on the same lot and not have to subdivide it under, I think that's still limited to under 2 acres.
Interesting.
But you could have the medium and the large. Or the
Medium,
high.
yeah, medium and
And
large,
high.
but you couldn't have a 4-plex and a
Have
12-plex.
The
Yeah,
large ones.
yeah, and that's partially a recognition that anything under a 4-plex is likely, a 4-plex or lower is likely to only be 2 stories. And then anything larger than a 4-plex becomes more likely as you go up to be 3 or 4 stories tall.
Is there anything now where the side setback is greater than 10 feet?
For residential, I don't think so. No. No, because these are not residential. Yep. Okay, a couple other little things. Inclusionary zoning, it was tweaked. It wasn't changed by a lot from what was there before. There was a lot of like, you have a unit and you get a bonus unit, like there's a lot of moving parts that were streamlined. And this matches the state's optional standards. So the state has a definition for an affordable housing development. That is an optional program that gets you some things like an additional floor, 40% more density, things like that. Those are the 2 things, it's not things like that. But we have made the state's optional standards mandatory. Yeah.
This is citywide.
Yes. Yep. Inclusionary zoning was citywide as of a few years ago. Yep. And then these adapted regulations are also citywide. So the threshold is 10 units. So if you build less than 10 units, you don't have to. You can still use the state optional program to get the bonuses if you wanted them. And by putting in units. But we triggered it as mandatory at 10, so of 10%, which makes it 1 or 2 units from 10 to 24. Anything 25 or higher is 20%, which makes it effectively 3 units or above because of the way it rounds. Ownership units are only 10% for either category. So if you had 30 units in a building and the whole thing was condos, you'd only have to do 10% permanently affordable. That was what was in before, and it was maintained to encourage ownership units. If you can sell more units at a market rate, if you're selling them, then you might be more likely to have ownership units, but it's just one piece in the puzzle of allowing or encouraging ownership units in multifamily
And the
buildings.
bonus is an extra floor,
Yes, yep,
because we don't
if-
have any density limit.
Right, right, yep. So effectively, if you are 25 units or above, you have to do it, and you have to do the state standard, therefore you get the extra floor. Effectively, what that means is in the HSMU, the height is 7 floors. There's a maximum of 7 floors through a combination. It's 5 floors with nothing, with no additional, becomes 6 with the bonus from the state. And then we allow you to buy TDRs to cover the top floor up. So it'll be up to 7 floors effectively on the Shelburne Road corridor, which is partially why we're re-examining the city center heights, because currently city center heights are 5. So
Mhm.
it doesn't make a lot of sense for us when we've declared city center is our most, efficiently used land. It's our most urban landscape, most walkable, most all these things. And then we don't allow the same height as other places. So that's part of that conversation. Unfortunately, what we've learned from builders is once you go above 5, you really need to do like 10 for it to, because you need to change how you're building the building. So I think we're likely to see sort of 5 floor buildings along the Shelburne Road corridor, unless we take that maximum up to 8, 9, 10. And then we might see 8, 9, 10, but I don't think the likelihood of seeing 6 or 7 is very high. Unless material prices go through the floor, which it doesn't seem like they're going to.
Is there hesitancy to raise the ceiling to 10?
It's not hesitancy, it is careful consideration. I think there is thought and
Politically correct.
Yeah. I think it's people doing their homework. It's like not wanting to be like, sure, sounds good, let's just do it. It's, in city center, there are probably places that should be 10 or 14, and there are places that shouldn't. There are some rules in form-based code for transition to the neighborhoods that are next to the form-based code area. So the same thing is probably true along Shelburne Road. Like there will be places that it's more or less sort of consistent with the area to be higher. I think there's some appetite and for discussion. We'll see how it all shakes out.
And also you have to wonder how that neighborhood is gonna absorb that many more people, cars, possibly cars, but, I mean. a 10
Which Shelburne Road?
Yeah, or it's, having a 10
Yep.
foot, 10 floor building versus.
Yeah, the intention
Yeah.
is to allow that kind of height in city center because the whole project is making it more walkable and transit friendly, and
Yeah.
maybe you don't need to get in a car to go to your grocery
Exactly.
store, etc. So having more height here has been more holistically thought through at this point than it has been thought through for Shelburne Road.
So city center is the tax increment financing district.
Yes,
It is, so it's not just here, we're talking,
this is city center.
I know, but the
City
tax
cen-
increment financing district is bigger than city center.
The borders are different.
Yeah.
Right now there is a Newtown Center, the form-based code area, the tax increment finance district, and they all overlap in slightly different ways on their
UIF
edges,
is University Mall going down Joseph Street. so-
including here.
Including-
Yes,
Right.
and goes down to San Remo Drive. It is the form-based code area. Yes, which is effectively city center.
But the 5 max is the rest of the city now. Right?
It's the HSMU,
HSM, oh, okay.
which is the Shelburne Road corridor, more or less. Last thing, commercial. The other thing we've put into this that is housing related is allowing small neighborhood serving commercial in very specific areas. So there's a good amount of our city that currently allows 0 commercial uses prior to November. this is our attempt to kind of make little inroads into the like corner store, neighborhood cafe, you know, down the street, yoga studio, convenience store, you know, bodega style, like something that is, makes a neighborhood more walkable.
Smith.
Yes, exactly. Makes a neighborhood more walkable, makes people sort of stay out of their cars a little bit, be able to get milk from the corner store instead of having to drive across town to Hannaford. No shade to Hannaford, but just being able to do that. It is very specifically restricted to a few types of uses that are intended to be neighborhood serving. So it's not something like a doctor's office where, yeah, maybe if you live in that neighborhood, you might be more likely to choose that doctor, but the doctor will be drawing from a much larger area. It's not intended to increase traffic in an area. It's intended to serve that area. So it's it's a sort of small number of things and is restricted to the more quote major roads. So, you know, the intersection of Patchen and White Street, like something that is not deep in a neighborhood, where it's right next to and surrounded by homes. It's sort of on the more commercial-like streets,
But not a gas station.
not a gas station. Correct.
I mean,
Not a gas station.
But like a coffee shop.
Yes.
What about like a
Restaurant, very small retail. Oh, there's a lot of other requirements too. Like there's a limitation on the square footage. There's a limitation on lighting and parking. So you can't have a big parking lot. You can't put like a CVS there, even though it's retail. There's how your dumpsters have to be screened. Like it's very specific to work with and blend into a neighborhood.
what about a mini grocery store?
If it fits in the square footage, yes. But I think the square footage is 3,500 square feet.
So it's not very big.
So, you know, New York bodega
it would be a
style
bodega.
grocery
With
store.
everything from the floor to the ceiling.
Exactly. Yeah. So just our attempt to get our foot in the
Yes,
door to
yes,
making
it's
something
wonderful.
that's more like sort of incremental steps towards allowing these sort of small scale commercial uses in our existing neighborhoods.
So, quick question, would a doctor's office consider commercial space?
Yes,
Yes.
but it is not this because it is not retail or restaurant. Medical office is a different commercial use.
So
Well,
it's.
Could that be blended within the residential apartments?
No.
Okay.
Apartments, yes, because this is only in the this is allowed in the low scale and the medium scale neighborhoods. In the areas that allow the larger apartment buildings, there are a lot more commercial uses that are also allowed. So like on Kennedy Drive, you can have a doctor's office. It could be, you could have a big residential, you could have a residential building that's a fourplex or an eightplex or whatever right next to it, or on the upper floors and the doctor's office is the bottom floor.
Okay.
But that's allowed in the MSN. Currently, in this round of amendments, this is the only commercial use that is allowed in the LSN. So that's the traditional single family home neighborhoods, like Chamberlain neighborhood,
Okay.
Butler Farms, Mayfair Park, etc.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, so as you go to higher density uses, more types of commercial uses are allowed. And then once you go all the way up in the commercial uses, things that are incompatible with housing are the things that are allowed in those other zoning districts that don't allow housing. So a big manufacturing facility is not allowed somewhere that allows housing.
Question for the chair.
Yes,
Looking at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
yeah.
I'm
no,
done.
It's done.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We
Just
wanna get
getting
to-
everybody on the same page.
The governor's housing bill. Do you want to start us off in the discussions?
Well, it's a very large bill. I don't know how much, what people want to focus on, like all the new money. Or, there's some major proposals about, minimum requirements to appeal. I was gonna mention that, this, on the summary, the spark is actually sort of, a modification of TIF. it's more project-based, but the whole idea is that you can get money for, especially I think for infrastructure, and there's a lot in here for sewer and water, and in smaller communities, I think they're really looking at trying to make it easier and better for the rest of the state, not so much. So I'm more into, there's so much here, I'm in our time, what are areas that people are most interested in? And I just wanted to mention that public hearing tomorrow at 1 o'clock is really related to the spark, the new form of variation of TIF. That's what it's specifically related to. So,
And just for reference, you do have till 7:50 because the tech hub thing was Tom Bailey's, so.
oh, yeah.
Well, so I have a couple thoughts about I mean, we're not gonna go through line through the
Yeah.
bill, but there's some general concerns, when we think about, I mean, so there's, coming down from the state, we've done all our own kind of planning and, just from this LDR discussion, implemented a lot of changes. So my one question I had was with what's coming down from the state, are we kind of in line with what's coming down with the state, or how much change would we have to do to conform to some of these proposals, or are we already in line? And yeah, and then, so that would be one kind of question. And then the other kind of topic too is, how do we want to kind of stay up on everything that's happening? Because this is gonna change, right? This isn't, it's complete form. And so how's it gonna affect South Burlington? And how do we want to stay on top of and engaged in this process?
That's a
So-
very good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so-
And,
yeah.
it really could affect housing in a very clear way. And just as we've seen from Kelsey's last presentation, the last housing law that she was responsible for bringing up to apply to South Burlington LDR, is clearly having an effect. And according to several of the authors we've read, state law changes are better than local law changes. And so this is promise. To what extent, it's your question, same as yours, but to what extent does this committee want to help the state government come up with laws to bring more housing into Vermont that would also help South Burlington, right?
I will say, oh, go ahead.
Do we have a house rep that's involved in
Yes,
Okay.
Emily,
Emily?
because this is starting in her committee. And she's the ranking member. She could be a source of staying abreast of things.
It wasn't Emily, last year. In the committee,
She was on the Housing Trust.
housing trust committee,
Emily. Crasso.
Emily Crasso.
one of the.
Crasso.
Yeah,
She.
Oh, Emily Crabford.
Yeah.
that's all right.
Emily.
And she does, and then all of the reps do periodical, like often at the end of the month, they'll do like a Monday, for some reason it's always on a Monday, these legislative evenings at the library where they answer questions and just keep us abreast on what they're working on. And we usually go around and talk about and then solicit feedback from the audience. But given what we've heard from Kelsey, and sort of seeing kind of some preliminary ideas from the governor. A lot of it's not quite, it's kind of hard to tell for me from, just a look.
Yeah.
How that's gonna really shift us.
So I haven't looked at the bill completely in depth because these things shift so
Yeah.
much. But I will say that South Burlington went past the previous housing, the state level housing bills, in various directions that sort of, when I said sort of adapted and made more useful in South Burlington, and also kind of pushed the envelope farther than the state. So I think there will be bits and pieces in the bill that we are pretty closely aligned, and it's changing a couple of words, and there's going to be places that it's a completely different topic that we need to address. But that's how it's always going to be. It's how it's always been. When, new state law comes in, we need to tweak our rules to meet them. I don't think it'll be the same degree of lift as it was for this round to come up to compliance and then over compliance. But whatever the state comes up with, there will be required changes. I just don't think it'll be as dramatic.
Did we have carve outs? I remember there was a big discussion a couple of years ago around sort of some desire to have certain types of carve outs for South Burlington. That
For South Burlington specifically?
yeah,
No,
that never happened.
no. And it
Okay.
was more, you can't really say South Burlington doesn't have to do this. It's
Yeah.
more that like
Yeah,
writing the laws in a way that doesn't catch South Burlington in a way when
Yeah.
it just happens to be that we're the only municipality that it would apply to.
right.
So short answer is no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
One
But
thing
it was adapted.
Yeah.
one thing I noted, because I sat through the town meeting at your recommendation, Sandy, and if I think about, there's a pretty good fund that's built up, assuming this budget passes in the housing trust. And we know, at least Dorset Commons had to forego some ARPA funding because they weren't ready, and they indicated an interest in redeploying it to rehabilitation, weatherization in particular. And if there are opportunities to sort of tap into these funds first, with projects like that, and we can keep the housing trust fund available for other things, I think we could potentially get more bang for South Burlington's buck. And that I think is important to keep on top of this for those reasons, and things we know that may be in the pipeline would be helpful to, I don't know what the right interface would be for any of those organizations, but kind of figuring that out. Because that was an immediate need I saw when I sat through this the first time.
Well, when we think about inviting Emily to one of our meetings and have her go over this with us, would it be a waste of her time? Would she have time to do this?
I don't think she spends the night over there.
Mhm.
I mean, Wednesday night, if she stayed there, that wouldn't be a problem, but.
Yeah,
Well, you should always zoom in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
you could-
true.
Yeah.
sure.
Or maybe just an update. It might be-
Yeah.
Yeah.
The long film.
Yeah.
Again, it might be early, and if this has just been released, it's early in the process.
It's certainly in the process for sure. But it's good to kind of see what's out there in terms of proposals. And the CPRC, the Regional Planning Commission, they're hosting. Because there's this other topic within the report around mapping,
Yes.
right? So, and that's gonna be, I mean, a lot of everything's gonna fall from there. So, and it's obviously countywide, but that would be particular interest, because the other thing is, it's not, we're looking at housing more regionally, because we're taking a little more regional approach. I guess it's really helpful to see what are other cities, what are other towns, communities doing, right? And what's happening there. And also just the education for our community, that it's not all falling on us just because we're another large, large community. Like there's other places absorbing housing, and it's, I think it would be good to stay in, and if we see any suggestions that feel like would be, beneficial to our neighborhoods, or maybe not so, I don't know, yeah.
Do you know if the League of Cities and Towns will be have a written position on this?
I don't know if they're going to take a written position on it, but they are a resource for kind of keeping updates,
Mhm.
and also, I haven't heard that they will, but they certainly might take a position.
Who's that saying?
The League of Cities and Towns. The one thing I see in here is a lot for smaller towns, but it also seems to be trying to help smaller developers
Yeah.
of fewer units, and that, of course, fits in with our desire to have more infill. And I really like that, because it seems like most of our developers are the big developers, the
Yeah.
32 units per building kind of thing.
And a lot of technical support for people who want to do smaller projects.
Yeah, smaller projects, right? But I'm wondering if our land is so expensive, is that keeping? Do they need quantity, economies of scale, more units in order to pay for the land kind of thing? I don't know.
Well, with the new LDRs, you might be seeing more people it's
Yeah,
converting property or converting land to increase housing, and that would be the more smaller scale type of stuff, where this type of technical assistance would be pretty helpful.
That podcast I listened to yesterday, one of the things that the researchers did was they interviewed 5,000 people about different development land use issues. And they did they swapped out two words in one of the questions they asked, and when they said large developers and they said small developers. And large developers got a lot of negative reaction.
Mhm.
But small developers said,
Mhm.
we like that. We had a lot of encouragement.
Mhm.
And so it's nice to see in this that there's money set aside, obviously in order to help small developers. I mean, if it's those two words that we just have to change as we try to get more housing, let's say small developers.
The large developers usually can outlast the opposition.
yeah.
Yeah.
Small developers,
Yeah.
they don't
Yeah.
have the money to spend years and years
Yeah.
in court, right?
Sure.
Larkin was always famous for that. He would just be able to withstand any, 5 years later, he could build it.
They also have sort of more wiggle room in their budgets generally for, if you're like, oh, well, we'll build a median, or we'll build a hedge in front of the fence or whatever, like they have a little more space along the margins to do some of those projects, that, maybe 0.25% of the total building project for something like these, but is 5% of the building cost for something small.
I wonder if, would the city ever consider like having awarding $50,000 to like 3 homeowners that decided to convert their single family house to a fourplex?
Owner occupied,
What?
owner occupied,
Yeah,
meaning like still staying there and then
Yeah.
rent the other
Yeah.
three.
I mean, we've got to get that started.
Yeah, but that's gonna be considered as an investment to the property owner.
Of course, but it's also 3 housing units. There might be like a 5-year kind of thing where they have to be affordable or something.
Well, you are the Housing Trust Fund Committee at this point.
I know,
So-
that's what I mean.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
just
can
thinking
see the
that's
wheels, I
Yeah.
can see the wheels turning,
Yeah.
yeah.
So his-
It's like,
the-
we need somebody at Butler Farms to do this so that we can,
Right, the
people
history of
can
it,
see what the opportunity is, and that if it happens, it's not the end of the world.
right, the history of as I understand it, if you have $50,000 that you can provide to a large developer, as the gap funding in a big stack of funding that then gets 400 units built, that might be the last little piece that puts it all together. That has been seen as more cost effective than $50,000 to do one.
I know, but I'm thinking of this as a catalyst. But I'm talking about $50,000 to create 3 new units.
Yeah.
Single family homes cost about $500,000 to build.
An existing single family home conversion.
Yeah.
I rather give like 50,000 to a small developer, than a large developer.
Oh, yeah, this
The
would
large
be-
developer already has the backup. and
Well,
can-
this, my idea is it
stuff in-
would be the homeowner in partnership with a small developer. That would convert. The house.
Well, I have it written down, future agenda items.
Future agenda items.
Housing trust fund
Yeah.
process
Well, I'm
and
just-
standards.
To make our land development regulations come to life. Okay,
Will
I'll
do.
shut up.
Yeah, well,
There's the property tax relief that could be built into development like that.
Oh, but the state punishes you for that.
It's boring.
Yeah.
I'm saying, you know, other cities that have really depressed property incentive develop,
Mhm.
you know, crack houses, places that are succumb to that kind of stuff. That we don't have that here, but there's a housing shortage, so. you know, sort of
It's within the
property-
charge to
mean, so
incentivize. I
There's only so
believe.
far that's $300,000 goes.
I know.
50, even a small developer, $50,000, apart from the fact that it's private, you know, is not gonna be meaningful for a development like that. At this point, the way
It's a-
costs are.
It's a kitchen renovation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's-
Yeah. Or a bathroom.
so
I'm not saying the $50,000 would cover the full.
Oh,
cost. I'm talking about cash. I mean, you're thinking about the income you get that would pay you back.
So maybe that can be like a thing that we kind of explore as like, what would be the things that would jumpstart interest in the housing trust fund that stay within the parameters? And also be a catalyst, and we can kind of mull that over and kind of put it on the agenda. Did you say something you wanted?
For a future agenda.
Yeah.
recommendation. It is on the council's policies and priorities for the year coming of fee relief for affordable housing. And that would directly address some of
How did you call it?
Fee relief.
waiving
Oh,
waiving
right.
city fees.
Those kinds of reforms are really.
Yeah,
I'm trying to, I wanna go back to see, Rutland's really put together a package of things. And I think one of them is a major fee reduction.
Yes.
I mean, going like from $2 or something to 3 cents or something, you know, really major.
I attended the Vermont Homes for All mentioned that's driving some of this stuff, and that toolkit that they handed out was driven for small developers. And one of the things was, okay, great, land use is one thing, but the actual cost is minuscule.
Mm.
We have a little control over that, so we want to do that spark. That would be a good area to focus our efforts on.
I had just a couple, just as we kind of, we got a couple more things before we wrap up tonight. Folks that want to, anybody want to, or maybe it's something we can all do, but kind of stay in touch with what's happening, you know, because things do kind of happen quickly, or can, I mean, it's, you know, changes happen and, you know, these are dynamic bills, and so does anybody want to kind of keep on top of some of this, what's happening in Montpelier? I mean, it won't be your whole job, but just, does anybody have like an interest in it, or just even passing along what they hear to the committee in between meetings? You know,
Well, I thought we were maybe thinking of trying to have Emily.
well, we can, I mean, I think
Do
we can
that.
have Emily, but, you know, next meeting, but I think in between
Oh.
now and next
Oh,
meeting,
in
just like as
between.
things come up, you know, passing them along to the committee that are relate to the bills and relate to what's happening. I can pass on the CPRC meetings that are coming up over the springtime or winter and spring, but it might be something that would be helpful for everybody to kind of stay in the loop.
Maybe everybody should do that, because we all have different sources.
Okay.
I
then-
just personally, I know this is not the committee, but I'm gonna communicate my legislator, but all 4 of our city ones, or now we have 5, I don't think that 20% of the population is where we ought to be, but I think it would be good to have more than 20 individuals required for an appeal. I also think that having, if the people that appeal lose, having them be responsible, possibly responsible for legal fees is reasonable, and it's not something, it's done elsewhere. This has gotten, you know, the court system can be really used in a way that's very counter to the public interest, so this is the kind of thing that's not new. You know,
The
Vermont wouldn't be, you know, a
First-
forerunner kind
Yeah.
of thing on this, and
The-
I
the
just,
French do it.
I
Yeah.
think that's a good idea. And if they can get the court to put high priority on these appeals when they do happen. Those are the things
It's-
that I, you know, this,
One on there a couple of things on there that I noted was the number of houses in Vermont that are going out of date need to be removed.
yeah.
Yeah.
That was a stunning
Yeah,
number.
that was
And-
really,
And so when you say maybe, 50,000, that helps stimulate, renewal of a house into a quadplex or something. And I thought that was a pretty nice idea. And something they have on there seems to be reducing the wetland buffer
mhm.
for one of the
saw that.
types of wetlands.
I think it was class 2. Yeah.
South Burlington has an extraordinarily large buffer of 100 feet. Do you know what it is, Kelsey? Is it type 1, 2, or 3? It must be 2 or 3, I think.
2.
That's extraordinarily large.
It is, yes.
And
In Vermont, yes.
yeah, I understand there's only one other municipality that has 100 feet. Everyone else is closer to 50.
50 is the state number at this point, but yes.
They're proposing to reduce it to 25.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
yes.
that'd be fabulous, because Vermont has, yeah, all over Vermont, it's so uneven, there's wetland everywhere.
So these would be things to kind of pay attention to and say, well, what's happening on these fronts as we move along, because that, that may change, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and that would impact how things are developed and move through our city. I want to just I just want to say thank you for bringing this onto the agenda. It's now. It was really good reading, so thank you.
Can I just say one other thing, and that is at the end, they had all that data sort of on how we got here. And the number of, whatever you call them, new people and this,
New Americans.
no,
No, it's just
I'm
people
talking
moving
about
here.
the people during the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
The graph goes
for
up
1 year.
like that,
For
for
1 year.
1 year. So
Yeah,
it just really showed me how people moving in, and sometimes they own the house and only stay there a few weeks or rent it or whatever, that really affected our housing availability.
Did you note the excess number of deaths over births? In that same chart?
Yes, I did.
Terrible. It's
Wow.
awful.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
far more people are dying.
Yeah,
There's no way to save anything.
so I'm sorry, but
Do we want to, I raised this question of just connection with other committees, and do we want to foster some, maybe attending any other committees that we have as housing? I mean, we are gonna be involved in the open space master plan, but is there any other interest areas in terms of checking and making connections? I was thinking of the for obvious reasons of, that's why I had Tom Bailey coming to this, is economic development is one that I would think of just off the top of my head, but is there any other community connections that we'd like to learn?
I think it's helpful as Kelsey does her work in the planning commission. When she brings those changes, the only thing relevant to housing, you bring it up.
Yep.
We can go to the house. Ryan might have something.
There's an economic development strategy meeting next Thursday.
Mhm.
There's one in the morning that I think is with the the South Burlington Business Association, and then one at 6 in the evening. That I think is broad.
Is that related to their master plan as well?
A strategic plan, yeah.
Strategic plan?
And what day is that again?
Thursday, the 20th.
And this morning, yeah. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
And are they accessible online, do you know?
I don't know.
Ryan?
Yeah, I was gonna suggest the Natural Resource and Conservation Committee because in a lot of ways, I think there's a focus on doing the opposite thing on their plate. They spent a substantial amount of time last year working on or attempting to work on some code changes that would make housing development much more expensive. And it didn't end up going anywhere, but they're looking from a perspective that is very much more preventative. And I can see that what comes out of both of these two committees might end up clashing at later points. And so figuring out sooner in the process if there are like really big hangups or things that will be interfering with each other might actually allow both committees to move things further along to the planning commission.
Well, Larry, you're a member of both, right?
I am, and I was gonna mention the buffer discussion will be hot topic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Will be a-
The wetland buffer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be a
Yeah.
hot topic.
okay.
Because
Yeah.
that's a fairly recent dimension.
The 100 feet expansion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
From all the open space.
Yeah, it
work
was
that happened in the
within,
past 5 or
within
6
3 years, yeah, 3-4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
so, so having that looked at again, that's gonna be, it's close to a lot of people's thinking. Enjoying that buffer,
Mhm.
whatever developments happen to fall into that realm. And then to change that would be, gonna be tricky.
Yeah, and I think that's.
So we
one
do
of
have, I'm just only pointing out that we do have Larry who is overlapping the two
Yeah.
committees. So if others are thinking about what committees they might want to check in with once in a while or attend the meeting as a member of the public or whatever it might be, we've got NRCC covered by
Yeah,
Larry.
Is
Yeah.
Yeah.
is the city center district exempt? Does wetland?
No.
No? No, I just think it's.
This is a whole thing before my time with the state and the city. And there was a lot of working out. There's a lot of working out of things.
Well, there isn't, but then.
Mhm.
I know.
So agree that the city has such well-defined stormwater policy and a really great department. It's worth following this in a way
Yeah.
that makes sense from both sides.
yeah, yeah,
And the expertise of Dave, blank for last name, I just totally lost.
Wheeler.
Wheeler, he would be a great person to come in and to talk about the work. Stormwater walk and what a buffer actually does for property. And all the existing stormwater ponds that are all outdated that need to be upgraded. That's being held up by federal money that, talk about a kick in the pants. But anyway, so that's an issue with that. I mean, it's this, the buffer, having a buffer sounds great, but there's real reasons to having it. It really provides that stormwater infrastructure that's so necessary. So this is another side of it that's.
well, and I think just that education of all the stakeholders, I mean, I think what it's kind of getting to kind of what Brian said is that rather than having this choke point down the road, having stakeholders so that we can form relationships so that we're sitting in on the same discussions and that the, stakeholders are involved as opposed to the push and pull of things rather than that doesn't feel very productive. So, yeah, so that's part of my thinking of, do we want to make these connections and get that education and see the other sides of things?
What about inviting him, David?
I just wrote his name down, Stormwater, David Hill. Yeah. his committees, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it's just an idea. I mean, he says, so, I mean, that's one thing that if he having the natural resource, he staffs that committee. So we've all gotten old.
That's a good thing.
Well, this.
Just
and it-
engineering. He's an
Yeah,
engineer.
oh,
He's
so-
he's the head of stormwater at DPW.
So in terms of, it doesn't he know what.
Well, it's just that I'd be interested in learning and
I know.
why the
yeah,
100 feet is
Yeah,
really important. Uh-huh.
yeah, no, I think that's a good point. So just to kind of pull things together for the meeting, we've got, so Vince is working on fair housing. I'm gonna go back and work with CVOCO.
CBO, EO.
EO, sorry. We're gonna all stay on top of the path, the housing bill. Tom Bailey next time. And thinking about who we want to make connections on the committees. We didn't get to this tonight, but just one of the seeds I want to plant is, building up the house.
The webpage.
Having a web page and what do we want on it, and we can do that, right? We can have stuff on a web page.
You can have stuff on the webpage.
Yeah.
There's boundaries, guardrails.
Oh,
I'll call them guardrails.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's fine, that's fine. That's
Well,
fine.
you'll.
We don't want to make the job bigger, but just what would we want to have on it, and who wants to take that up maybe, and that kind of thing.
Well, I'm happy to manage the committee's webpage as a,
Yeah,
on the staff end of things, so I can work closely with our communications manager and everything else. But like the discussion of like what things are you talking about wanting to have on the webpage is here, and I think there's also an opportunity for. There's the committee's webpage and there's the city's website. And I think there are things that should be on one and there's things that could be on the other. Resources for residents doesn't necessarily have to be on the housing committee's webpage. It's possible there's opportunity for, outside resources for the residents from, not that aren't the city, but are, in the
Exactly.
community that can be on the greater website in a different place. That's more like a
yeah.
topic place and not a committee place. So
So
these are
just-
things I can talk with Andy about.
Yeah, and just let's be thinking about if we have specific ideas of what we would want to be helpful to the community around the topic of housing. It doesn't need to have our stamp on it. And so I'd like to kind of just wrap that up. And anybody want to move to?
You can just leave.
Did you have a question?
Just
I thought I saw
for
your
our
hand.
next.
Mhm.
Said operationally. Spend some time on how to get the housing trust fund money over a little bit. Seems like we've been passively waiting and we're not receiving applications and our
Yeah.
money is accumulating and contribution in July?
Mhm.
End of June, July, yeah, end of June.
Thank you for the weekends for 75,000. Fantastic. But I am concerned that if we don't put the money out the door, that funding may dry up.
Yeah.
And how do we solicit applications?
So why don't we have a big discussion about that
Yeah.
next time, and both what criteria and then how do we solicit folks? Or put the word out there,
Yeah.
and who would we want to what kinds of things do we want to prioritize? Doesn't sound,
Right, 'cause those are tightly related because
yeah,
the people who use it currently are the people who already know about it, and those are the big developers. They all know about it. And then it's discussions about who can use it and when they can use it and all these other things, but this is not, calling up Larkin and saying, hi, do you want some housing trust fund money? Like they know about it. So it's, I think, setting the standards for what kinds of projects does this committee think the money should be going towards, then frames how to promote it and who to promote it to.
Yeah, it's just, if you don't use it, you're gonna lose it.
yeah, no, that's
Maybe
a good point.
someone, do you think someone's gonna come back in for if they're doing 2 more developments, 2 more buildings in Orion?
We just got the last of that funding, I think, at our last meeting.
Oh.
We approved that.
Mhm.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Adjourn.
Thanks, everyone.
8:05.
Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan.
Safe travels,
Good
Megan.
night.
Thanks for coming, Ryan.
Is anyone else going to the CHT?
I am.